So as I was telling you, okay, how to have an approach for a pedigree question. So now we are going to see that, okay, how to have a approach for pedigree question. So first we should know what are the pedigree symbols, right? So pedigree symbols are important for exam point of view, and examiner can ask question from this topic also, right? So whenever we discuss about pedigree symbol, this circle and square, these are the two common symbol we will be seeing. Circle is for female, square is for male, right? When circle is half shaded, this is called carrier, right? So when circle or square is half shaded, this will be considered as carrier, right? So in pedigree symbol we must remember how we are going to show the carrier. So these are how we are going to show the carrier in pedigree symbol, right? When you are seeing a pedigree symbol like this, where this entire circle is shaded or entire square is shaded, this will be a disease, right, or affected. So disease or affected. So what we need to understand, okay, if examiner give you a symbol, this is the unique symbol which I am going to show you. If there is a circle and there is a dot, so what is this symbol stands for? Can be a future question. So this is the carrier. This is the symbol for carrier of X-linked recessive disorder. So in X-linked recessive, carrier will be shown by a circle and dot into it, right? Now, when you see a symbol like this and it is corrected to the female, so it's a marriage, right? So this is the marriage, and what kind of marriage it is? It is consanguineous or non-consanguineous? So it's a non-consanguineous marriage, right? So this is the symbol for non-consanguineous marriage. Non-consanguineous marriage, right? So this is non-consanguineous marriage. So when you are seeing a symbol like this is non-consanguineous marriage. When you are seeing a symbol where there is a double connection, so this is the consanguineous marriage, right? So this is consanguineous marriage. Right, so this is the consanguineous marriage. This consanguineous marriage was the older All India question. So just keep that in mind. This was the older question in All India exam. So examiner may repeat this question. So consanguineous marriage symbol, you will be having double line connecting these two, right? So this is consanguineous marriage, right? When you see a symbol where you are seeing a circle or square and arrow is pointing towards them, so it is an index case. This is the index case or proband. So examiner can ask this question also. See, these are proband or index case, right? But when you see a circle or square where arrow is through and through, so now you can see their arrow is passing through and through. So this will be called as deceased or dead patient. So these are deceased or dead patient. So deceased or dead patient will be shown by this symbol, right? If there is a symbol where you are seeing it is looking like this, so it is neither male nor female, so unknown gender or hermaphrodite. So this symbol is for unknown gender or hermaphrodite. When you are seeing a symbol like this, a triangle is made, so this is a symbol of miscarriage or abortion. So this is the symbol of miscarriage or abortion. So abortion is by triangle. Miscarriage or abortion will be shown by triangle, right? If examiner makes a symbol like this, where he is showing a male and there is a broken line between these two, so this is emotional attachment or extramarital affair, right? So this is the symbol which had been asked earlier in one exam, right, where it has been asked with emotional attachment. So emotional attachment is by broken lines, right? And when you are seeing a symbol like this and there is nothing here, so it is sign of infertility, right? So this is the sign of infertility, right? So this is sign of infertility. When you see a symbol where it has been shown like this, right, two different gender, so these are These are dizygotic twins. So what is this? These are dizygotic twins. So these are dizygotic twin, and when symbol is shown like this is the, when symbol is like this, both are same gender, and this is called monozygotic twins, right? So this is monozygotic twin. So dizygotic twin and monozygotic twin is also important question in exam, right? When you are having a symbol where you are watching a male or female and they are inside the bracket, so this is the sign of adoption, right? So this is the pedigree symbol of adoption, right? So this is for adoption. So this can be also a future question in AIMS or all India exam, right? This adoption is a very important sign we have to keep in mind. So these are the different symbols which I had made for pedigree understanding. Now we will move to the approach. How should be our approach for any pedigree question? So now we are going to discuss what should be our approach for any pedigree question. Approach. What should be the algorithm? I should say, what should be the algorithm to be followed in case of X-link, so what should be algorithm to follow in case of pedigree based question in our exam? So try to rule out unclassic inheritance first, right? So just keep that in mind. Try to rule out unclassic inheritance disorder first. So here we will see gonadal mosaicism, right? Gonadal mosaicism, mitochondrial inheritance, right? So try to rule out gonadal mosaicism and mitochondrial inheritance, unclassic. First you try to rule out these two. So what we have to do, we have to rule out unclassic inheritance, then we have to rule out classic inheritance like X-linked recessive or X-linked dominant, and then in the last you try to calculate autosomal recessive or autosomal dominant, right? So this is just a protocol we have to understand to solve the pedigree question. So just don't come to the autosomal recessive and autosomal dominant calculation, because these are a kind of a mathematical analysis, right? So we should always keep that in mind. Try to rule out unclassic inheritance first, then X-linked disorder, then autosomal dominant. So now I am going to demonstrate you कि whenever pedigree question comes, how should be our approach. So take one example. Take one example of this, right? So number one, when you are seeing a pedigree and there is a male, there is a female, male, and none of them is affected. None of them is affected. So in this case, when you are seeing their generation, next generation, randomly you can observe there are one or two who are affected. So only one is affected, or you can say there are two affected, but both the parents are normal. Both the parents are normal. Variable number of kids are affected. It can be one, it can be two, right? So both the parents are normal and variable number of kids are affected. So in this pedigree, what I am showing you, both the parents are normal, right? Both parents are normal, and as I said, the variable number of kids will be affected. Variable number of kids will be affected. So in this pedigree we are observing that both the parents are normal but variable number of kids are affected. So what could be the reason? Is it a classic inheritance or unclassic inheritance? So that is the important, right? So it is not a classic inheritance. You can see they are not following Mendel law. Both the parents are normal and variable number of kids are affected. So why it is happening? Why it is happening? Kids are affected but parents are normal, because probably mutation is in gametes of the parents. Where? Gametes. Where? Gametes of the parent. So here this pattern is because of mutation in the gametes of the parent. So here we must understand mutation is in gametes. So gamete mutation is there. So gamete is having mutation, right? So gametic mutation is present in both the parents, and both the parents are having gametic mutation, right? But they are normal. So what is this called as? You remember, incomplete penetrance. Mutant gene is present. Mutant gene is present, but phenotypically he is normal. Incomplete penetrance, where you will see in autosomal dominant disorder. But now we are talking about Unclassic inheritance. So this unclassic inheritance is because of gamete mutation, and that is why it is called as gonadal mosaicism, because gamete will be having mixture of both normal and mutant gene. So that is why I wanted to tell you right now we are dealing with the topic of gonadal mosaicism, right? So this is the gonadal mosaicism, and by seeing this both parents are normal but their gametes are mutant, so this is a kind of reduced penetrance which is a property of autosomal dominant disorder. That is why gonadal mosaicism is also considered as a variant of autosomal dominant disorder. It is variant of autosomal dominant disorder. This point we must keep in our mind for concept purpose also and for exam purpose also, right? So gonadal mosaicism is a variant of autosomal dominant disorder where we are seeing the parents, their gametes are having mutation. This gametic mutation will be transferred to the next generation, and how many kids will be affected, that will be dependent on number of mutant gametes. So how much number of mutant gametes? So number of mutant gametes will be proportional to the number of affected kids, right? So number of mutant gametes will be proportional to the number of affected kids, right? So that is how we can understand this gonadal mosaicism. So whenever you will see a pedigree in your exam and examiner is telling that both parents are normal, variable number of kids are affected, so you must understand gamete mutation is there, and gamete number of mutant gamete will decide how many people or how many kids will be affected in next generation. So this is a clear-cut picture of gonadal mosaicism because of the gamete mutation in the gonads. And example of gonadal mosaicism is also autosomal dominant disorder example. So that is interesting point to understand. When you will see example of the gonadal mosaicism, they are also autosomal dominant disorder like achondroplasia. In achondroplasia you will see gonadal mosaicism. So remember this point also, कि achondroplasia is an autosomal dominant disorder. So as I said, these are variant of autosomal dominant disorder. Gonadal mosaicism is a variant of autosomal dominant disorder, and their example is also autosomal dominant disorder. This was the question in this All India exam. Achondroplasia is an autosomal dominant disorder. Another important thing we have to remember, osteogenesis imperfecta, another autosomal dominant disorder, osteogenesis imperfecta, right? So osteogenesis imperfecta, these are the two examples of the gonadal mosaicism. So whenever pedigree question comes, try to rule out or try to look for the gonadal mosaicism. When gonadal mosaicism is not there, then look for the another option. What is the another approach? Now we are going to see that also. Suppose we are seeing this pedigree. In this pedigree symbol, if you are finding female is affected and male is normal, from this affected female, all her kids were affected. All her kids, right? All her kids are affected, whether it is male or female, everybody is affected, right? So from the affected female, everybody is affected. Remember, this is another important and very frequently asked question in AIMS, PGI and All India, all exams, right? So all kids are affected, right? But from this affected father, from this affected kid, when he marries a normal female, none of them is affected. Now none of them is affected. So what is this pedigree? See, female is affected, all kids are affected, but from affected male, none of the kids are affected. So it is not a classical, right? It is not following Mendel's law. So it is again unclassic inheritance. And what is this unclassic inheritance? Mitochondrial inheritance. This is called as mitochondrial inheritance. So this unclassic inheritance is called as mitochondrial inheritance. This is called as mitochondrial inheritance. Mitochondrial inheritance, when you see mitochondrial inheritance, you are finding it is female who is transmitting disorder to all, means it is mother. So that is why sometimes it is also called as maternal inheritance. So just remember this point, that is why it is also called as maternal inheritance. So mitochondrial inheritance, mother is transmitting this disorder Why mother is transmitting disorder? Now we will see. Because ovum is rich in mitochondria. Suppose I am just drawing this ovum. Ovum is rich in mitochondria. Rich in mitochondria. Right? So ovum is rich in mitochondria. These are the mitochondria. And in this ovum mitochondria, there will be mitochondrial DNA, right? So in this ovum mitochondria, there will be mitochondrial DNA, right? So there will be mitochondrial DNA. So ovum is having mitochondrial DNA. What kind of mitochondrial DNA they will be having? Normal or mutant or both? So answer is both. So this mitochondrial DNA can be normal also, and this can be mutant also. So they are having mixture of normal and mutant mitochondrial DNA. So that is the simple thing which I wanted to tell you. Okay, when we are seeing mitochondrial inheritance, inside the ovum mitochondria, mitochondrial DNA is both normal and mutant type. So when you see a complex, when you see a combination of both normal and mutant mitochondrial DNA, this condition is called as heteroplasmy. This is called as heteroplasmy, which was the PGI question also. So this is called as heteroplasmy. This is called as heteroplasmy. What is the meaning of heteroplasmy? This was the question in PGI exam. Heteroplasmy means same organelle is having, see, mitochondria. Same organelle is having both normal and mutant mitochondrial DNA, right? Both normal and mutant, heteroplasmy. That is why it is called as heteroplasmy. So heteroplasmy is associated with mitochondrial inheritance disorder. So that was the true statement. So how it is associated with mitochondrial inheritance disorder? They are having normal and mutant also. So whenever this mutant mitochondrial DNA is above the threshold limit, right? Whenever this mutant mitochondrial DNA is above the threshold limit, there is a threshold limit, right? So when it is above the threshold limit, right? So as I said, there is always a threshold limit. So whenever this mutant mitochondrial level is above the threshold limit, it will be transmitted to the next generation, right? So when they are above the threshold limit, it will be transmitted to the next generation, right? So there will be transmission. So this will be transmitted to next generation, and then they will be reflecting them as a mitochondrial inheritance disorder, right? So that is very important. Mitochondrial inheritance. Now look at this. When you are seeing mitochondrial inheritance, why I said it is maternal inheritance? Because mother's ovum is the main culprit. Ovum is rich in mitochondrial DNA, and this mitochondrial DNA, you can see they will be of two types, normal and mutant. So this combination is called as heteroplasmy, and when mutant is above the threshold limit, then it will be transmitted to next generation and they will cause mitochondrial inheritance disorder. So if mother is causing disease, then what about this sperm? What about the sperm? Do they have mitochondrial DNA? Now the question is about a sperm. Do they have mitochondrial DNA? Answer is yes. So suppose I am showing you, this is the sperm, right? So sperm will have mitochondrial DNA. So that is the important thing we have to remember. Sperms, they do have mitochondrial DNA. Then why there is no disorder transmitted by the mitochondrial DNA of the sperm? So mitochondrial DNA of the sperm is, here it is very important to understand, it is selectively degraded during fertilization. Selective degradation. So they will be having selective degradation during fertilization. So during fertilization, when fertilization is going on, that time spermatic mitochondrial DNA will be having selective degradation by which pathway? This was the All India and DNB question this time, right? So this was the question. So sperm mitochondrial DNA will be selectively degraded during fertilization. So this was the question in this DNB exam. Okay, what is responsible for selective degradation of this mitochondrial DNA? The selective degradation is because of ubiquitin proteasome degradation pathway. So it is because of ubiquitin proteasome degradation pathway. So if you remember, when we have discussed in first chapter, that time intracellular protein degradation system, that time I told you that autophagy or ubiquitin proteasome degradation is associated with mitochondrial inheritance disorder. So that is the explanation here. You can see how this mitochondrial inheritance is not given by male because of the selective degradation of the mitochondrial DNA of the sperm during fertilization, and because of this there will be no transmission of spermatic mitochondrial DNA to next generation, right? So that is why you will not see any transmission from the affected father. So again I am going to show you this pedigree. So if you look at this pedigree analysis, again I will show you. You can see mother is transmitting but affected father is not transmitting because this sperm mitochondrial DNA has been selectively degraded by ubiquitin proteasome because sperm mitochondria has been degraded by ubiquitin proteasome degradation pathway, right? So these are the important points. So whenever the examiner asks you question, rule out gonadal mosaicism, rule out mitochondrial inheritance, and then you go for the X-linked disorder. But before, I would like to tell you examples of the mitochondrial inheritance disorder. So what are the examples of the mitochondrial inheritance disorder? Right? Examples of the mitochondrial inheritance disorder. Example of the mitochondrial inheritance disorder is Leber's hereditary optic neuropathy. This was the question in Vijay exam. This is the most common type of mitochondrial inheritance disorder, which was a false statement. It is not most common. It is prototype. Remember, Leber's hereditary optic neuropathy. This is Leber's hereditary optic neuropathy. Optic neuropathy. So Leber's hereditary optic neuropathy is a prototype of, this is the prototype of mitochondrial inheritance disorder, right? This is the prototype. So what will be the most common? Now the question comes to our mind, if it is prototype, then what will be the most common type of mitochondrial inheritance disorder? So most common type of mitochondrial inheritance disorder is Mela syndrome. Right? So most common type of mitochondrial inheritance disorder is Mela's syndrome. So what is Mela's syndrome? Mitochondrial encephalopathy. LA stands for lactic acidosis and stroke-like features. So mitochondrial encephalopathy, lactic acidosis, stroke-like feature. This is the most common mitochondrial inheritance disorder, and that was the NIMHANS question also, right? So that is how you have to understand this mitochondrial disorders. And there is one more example which examiner had asked in All India exam, that was NARP. What is NARP? Mitochondrial inheritance disorder, where N stands for neurogenic weakness. So NARP is neurogenic. N stands for neurogenic weakness. RP stands for retinitis pigmentosa. Right. So this was the question in All India exam. What is NARP? It is a mitochondrial inheritance disorder. So always remember, whenever pedigree question is asked, try to rule out gonadal mosaicism first, then rule out mitochondrial inheritance. When these two unclassic you have ruled out, then you go for the X-linked disorders. Right. So now you move to the X-linked disorders. Right. So third is X-linked disorders, and first we will discuss about X-linked recessive disorders. X-linked recessive disorder. So we have to understand X-linked means if it is a female, it will be XX, female, and male is XY, right? So there are certain basics which we have to understand before we proceed ahead. What is that basic understanding? That X chromosome of the father, so it is male, right? So what I wanted to say, that father, suppose he is a father, right? So father's X chromosome will be transmitted to whom? Daughter or son or both? So always remember this point. Father's X chromosome will be gone to daughter only. So it will be transmitted to daughter only. So this concept we should have in our mind, daughters only, right? So father's X chromosome will be going to daughter only. But when we are talking about mother, right, mother's X chromosome will be going to both son and daughter. So that is the important thing we have to understand. Whenever we talk about mother's X chromosome, it will be going to both son and daughter. But when we talk about father's X chromosome, it will be going to daughter only. So that thing should be clear in our mind before we go for X-linked recessive disorders. So here in this pedigree, I would like to show you, there is a female, male, father is affected, right? So father is affected. So I am showing you father is affected, mother is normal, and because of this, because we are seeing X-linked recessive disorder. So in X-linked recessive disorder, even one X chromosome is affected in a male, so they will be behaving like a disease. So this is a disease, right? So male is affected, they are diseased. So one X chromosome will be transmitted to whom? Daughter or son? So again, you remember, father's X chromosome will be going to daughters only. So daughters will be affected. So daughters will be affected, I should not say affected, daughters will be carrier because it is X-linked recessive. So daughters will be carrier. Both daughters will be having this X chromosome, so they are carrier. So this will be like this. So both will be having carrier. See this is disease, only one X chromosome, but here I am saying ki she is carrier. She is carrier. Why? Because there is a one X chromosome which is normal. Y chromosome is a weaker chromosome. That is why in X-linked recessive disorder, it cannot mask the expression of affected X chromosome. So male will be affected, but in case of female, when we are talking about female, so this normal X chromosome will mask the expression of affected X chromosome. That is why this female will be carrier, right? So female is carrier and none of the sons will be affected because X chromosome will be going to daughter only, right? Now look at the another scenario, when this daughter marries another male, right, who is normal, another male who is normal. See, male is normal, here it is normal, and here female is carrier, right? Here female is carrier. So what will happen into the next generation? So what will happen into the next generation? Because female X chromosome, so now you remember, female X chromosome will be going to daughter and son both. So daughter, one daughter will be having and one son will be having, right? So when daughter will be having, so it will be carrier, right, as we are seeing, and when son will be having, he will be diseased. So that will be the projection of X-linked recessive pedigree. So you can see X-linked recessive pedigree, male affected, transmitting disease to the female, and females are carrier, not diseased, they are carrier. But from the carrier female, when she marries the normal, what we are seeing, one daughter will be carrier and one son will be affected. So overall, if you look at this pedigree, what you are observing, only males are affected, right? Males are affected and females are carrier. Females are carrier. So whenever you see a pedigree where males are affected, see what I am writing, where males are commonly affected. So males are commonly affected. See the language which examiner uses in exam, the same way I am using the language. Males are commonly affected. Answer should be X-linked recessive disorder. Answer should be X-linked recessive disorder. Females are carrier. Females are carrier or normal. So the question is, females will be affected or not? Females can be affected or not? Question is, females can be affected or not in X-linked recessive disorder? So we have to understand, in case of X-linked recessive disorder, females can be affected. So that is why I am writing females may be affected. Females may be affected. So when female will be affected? So what are those special conditions? Females will be, or females may be affected when you are seeing Turner syndrome. See, this is the Turner syndrome. There is no X chromosome and one X is affected. So this is one exception. So keep that in mind. Turner syndrome, females may be affected, right? So females may be affected in Turner syndrome. This is number one. Second important condition, when you are seeing two X chromosome, right? One is affected and one is normal, right? So normal is masking the expression. So in some cases, when there is a random X inactivation, so what I am showing you here, another situation where you will be seeing random X inactivation. So in case of random X inactivation, this X chromosome will be inactivated. So this will be also showing disease. So these are two examples, two exceptions where you will find female can be also affected in X-linked recessive disorders, right? So always remember, what is the precise language I should describe this X-linked recessive disorder? Males are commonly affected, females may be affected. In case of Turner syndrome, in case of random X inactivation. What are the examples? Another important question which examiner had asked in earlier exam, what are the examples of the X-linked recessive? So most important and most frequently, G6PD deficiency anemia. So G6PD deficiency anemia is a X-linked recessive disorder. Hemophilia, if examiner says all hemophilias are X-linked recessive, true or false? So that time we should understand, not all hemophilias, only hemophilia C, right? So here we have to remember only, hemophilia A, only hemophilia A is X-linked recessive disorder. So when we talk about hemophilia B and C, see why I am making them in box, because they are autosomal recessive. So when examiner is saying hemophilia B or hemophilia C, they are autosomal recessive disorder. They are autosomal recessive. So that is the important point to understand. Be careful for the language. What kind of language examiner is using? Hemophilia A is an autosomal, hemophilia A is an example of X-linked recessive disorder, whereas hemophilia B and C, they are autosomal recessive. So that is the important thing which we have to keep in our mind, right? Another important question which examiner had asked in All India exam was the fragile X syndrome, right? So fragile X syndrome is also one example of the X-linked recessive disorder. So actually they are both X-linked recessive and dominant, but when examiner is asking you to choose single best option, your answer should be X-linked recessive is most common pattern of inheritance in case of fragile X syndrome. So this is about X-linked recessive disorder. Here in X-linked recessive disorder, if you remember what I have told you, X-linked recessive disorders, males are commonly affected. Suppose examiner says only males are affected in a pedigree, then what will be your answer? Only males are affected. So when examiner is saying only males are affected, see this language, only males are affected. Only males are affected, then what will be your answer? Only males are affected in Y-linked disorder, right? So only males will be affected in case of Y-linked disorder, and that was the question in All India exam 2014 and 15. Only males are affected. This question was given like this: a disease was transmitted from father to son only, right? Disease was transmitted from father to son only, father to son only. So you can see here in this pedigree you will find that son is affected, and then in next generation also only sons are affected, right? So you can see only sons are affected, females are not affected. So father to son only, Y-linked disorder. What are the examples of Y-linked disorder? Y-linked disorder example is hairy ears, right, which is also called as hypertrichosis, right? So it's a part of hypertrichosis. So hypertrichosis is a great example of X-linked, sorry, Y-linked disorders. So hypertrichosis is a great example of Y-linked disorder, right? So this is the Y-linked disorder. So always careful when examiner says most commonly males are affected, most commonly males, then answer should be X-linked recessive. But only males are affected, answer should be Y-linked disorder. Father to son only affected. That was the question asked in All India exam. So just that's the point we have to keep in mind, right? So now we have seen this X-linked recessive disorder. Now we are going to observe what we'll find in case of X-linked dominant, right? So now we are going to see X-linked dominant. So easy to understand. Whatever we have seen in recessive, which were carriers, they will become dominant, means diseased. For example, suppose if you remember, I have shown you a father who was affected, right? When he marries a normal female, what will happen? This father's X chromosome will be given to daughter or son or both. So we remember it will be transmitted to daughters only, because father's X chromosome will be going to daughters and this will be having no relation with the son. So both sons will be normal. So only daughters will be affected. So what I am showing you in this pedigree, from the affected father, only daughters are affected, sons are spared, right? And from this affected daughter, when she marries a normal male, so again you see here what I'm showing, when she marries a normal male, so you remember female means mother's X chromosome will be transmitted to both daughter and son. So when it will be transmitted to daughter, so in this case, because it is dominant, so daughter will be diseased and son will be also diseased. So it's a very beautiful picture which summarizes the X-linked dominant, where what it says, from affected father, only daughters will be affected. Only daughters will be affected, right? So what I'm showing you, from affected father, only daughters will be affected, right? Sons are spared, right? Sons are spared. Sons are spared, right? But from the affected daughter, see, from the affected daughter, what is happening? 50% of the daughter and 50% of the sons are affected, right? So in this pedigree, what we are seeing, from the affected daughter, right? So now I am showing from the affected daughter, 50% of the daughters and 50% of the sons are affected, right? So this is the summary of the X-linked dominant disorder. From the affected father, only daughters will be affected, sons will be spared. But from the affected daughter, 50% of the daughter, 50% of the sons will be affected. This is the characteristic of X-linked dominant disorder. And what is the example of X-linked dominant disorder? Example of X-linked dominant disorder I am introducing here, Alport syndrome. Because Alport syndrome is having all pattern of inheritance, and this is another important and very frequently asked question, what is the most common inheritance pattern? So always remember, X-linked dominant is the most common inheritance pattern, one of the very controversial and very frequently asked question in NEET exam. Right? So Alport syndrome is X-linked dominant pattern of inheritance, right? So this is example of X-linked dominant pattern of inheritance, right? So now we have seen all these X-linked disorders also. So first you rule out gonadal mosaicism, then you rule out mitochondrial inheritance, X-linked disorder. When everything is done, in the end you come to the level of autosomal dominant and autosomal recessive. So how you are going to solve autosomal dominant and autosomal recessive? Just some of the important tips which I wanted to tell you. Whenever you will see a pedigree analysis, right? Whenever you are seeing a pedigree analysis in which you are seeing a pedigree like this, you are seeing both genders are equally affected, right? Both genders are equally affected, and every generation there is someone who is affected. So mean to say that there is no skipping of generation. right? So every generation you will have affected person. So no gender bias, no gender bias, see male female both are affected, no gender bias, and no skipping of generation. So probably it is autosomal dominant disorder, right? So this is the autosomal dominant disorder. So always remember, in autosomal dominant disorder, what are the two things you have to remember? There will be no gender bias, right? So there is no gender bias, and there is no skipping of generation, right? So this is the hint for understanding, no skipping of generation. An example which had been asked in All India exam was the achondroplasia, right? Achondroplasia, Marfan syndrome, neurofibromatosis type 1 and type 2 both. So these are some of the examples of the autosomal dominant disorder. In autosomal recessive disorder, there will be, when you will see the autosomal recessive disorder, see what I'm saying, autosomal recessive disorder, whenever you will see our pedigree analysis, what you will see, there will be a skipping of generation, right? There will be some skipping of generation, right? So there will be skipping of generation, and next generation again you will see somebody will be affected. So no gender bias and skipping of generation will be seen. So in this generation no one was affected. So whenever you find no gender bias, see, just like an autosomal dominant, no gender bias, because these are autosomal disorder. So there will be no gender bias, but skipping of generation will be present, right? So as I said, skipping of generation will be present. So skipping of generation will be present and no gender bias will be there. So this will be autosomal recessive disorder. So here I want to explain you one important question regarding autosomal recessive, and to explain you how we solve this question mathematically. Suppose I am talking about autosomal recessive disorder. I am talking about autosomal recessive disorder where one parent is normal, right? So this parent is normal, another parent is carrier, because one is affected, so he is carrier. So this parent is carrier and this parent is absolutely normal. So question asked in exam was, how many kids will be affected in this condition? So now look at this, how to solve this question. See, this A and this A, so normal. Now this A and this A, so one is affected. So this will be autosomal recessive disorder. So this will be carrier, right? So this will be carrier. Now look at this one and look at this one, right? So both are again normal. So we can see these are normal and this one is carrier. So again you see this one and this one. What is happening? Again one is affected, one is this one, normal. So this is again carrier. So now we can see this is an autosomal recessive disorder. So that is how we have to calculate, or we have to analyze in exam time. So when we are seeing a presentation like this, so in an autosomal recessive disorder, as I said, one parent is carrier, and one parent is normal. So how many kids will be affected? How many kids are affected here in this pedigree analysis? 0%. See, 0%, 50% is normal and 50% is carrier. 50% is normal, 50% is carrier. So 50% normal, 50% carrier, and in this case, how many percentage will be affected? 0% will be affected. This is the older All India question, right? This question was modified in All India exam 2014, and question was asked like this, कि if one person in an autosomal recessive disorder, see what I'm writing, in an autosomal recessive disorder, one parent is normal, one parent is carrier, and one kid is affected. So most likely which pattern of inheritance, or most likely mechanism? So can you see this? What examiner is saying? Autosomal recessive disorder. See what examiner is saying, this is autosomal recessive disorder. One parent is normal, one parent is carrier, and one kid is affected. So what is the mechanism? So examiner is saying ki what is the mechanism of this kind of inheritance? because we are reading in autosomal recessive, if one parent is normal, one parent is carrier, none will be affected. But here examiner is saying no, one kid is affected. So what is your logic? So now we will see. One parent is normal, one parent is carrier, normal, and this is carrier. So how one kid is affected? So now we can see that what happens. There is a special condition where that affected allele or chromosome or gene is transmitted twice in the same kid. So because of this, you can see same gene has been transmitted twice, right? So the same parent, what is this called as? Same parent is transmitting affected gene twice. This is called uniparental disomy. So this mechanism is called as uniparental disomy, where two chromosomes are inherited from the same parent, and two chromosomes which is inherited from the same parent is unfortunately abnormal, right? So that is why it is called as uniparental, because one parent is giving. So this name itself is a informative name. Uniparental dibothsomy means chromosome. So uniparental disomy is the mechanism, and that was the answer. So whenever you are seeing a autosomal recessive disorder, whenever you are seeing a autosomal recessive disorder case, one parent is normal, one parent is carrier, and kid is affected. So definitely the basic mechanism underlying this is called uniparental disomy. One parent is giving both chromosomes. Somy means chromosome. One parent is giving both the chromosome which is affected one. So this is called uniparental disomy. So autosomal recessive disorder, one normal, one carrier parent, babies are affected. So it means it is a uniparental disomy. It's a rare phenomena. Remember, it's a rare phenomena, but you have to keep that in mind. In exam, they had asked this question, right? So this is how you have to develop approach for pedigree question. Whenever you see question, don't jump to a conclusion of autosomal recessive and dominant. Try to rule out gonadal mosaicism, then mitochondrial inheritance, then X-linked disorders. Then you think about this autosomal recessive and dominant. So this is how we can solve the question. So in our discussion, we have discussed two unclassic inheritance disorder. There are two more unclassic inheritance we are going to discuss now.